Every woman I have ever seen in my office who came in asking about cellulite made the same mistake before she walked through my door. She had already spent money, creams, wraps, laser sessions, radiofrequency devices, expensive scrubs that smell like vanilla and do absolutely nothing. She had also, almost without exception, lost weight, sometimes significant weight, and the dimples were still there, every single one of them. That pattern is not a coincidence, it is a clue. And for 15 years, the medical system handed those women a simple explanation and sent them home. Genetics, hormones, age, nothing you can do. Keep moisturizing. Here is a referral to a dermatologist who will offer you another round of treatments that will not work. If you are watching this channel for the first time, subscribe right now and hit like. I am Dr. Michael Carter, and I have spent 15 years watching what happens when medicine treats the symptom and ignores the mechanism. We are building this channel on one principle. The system profits when you stay confused. I profit when you understand. Help me reach 100,000 subscribers. Every single one of them gets information the clinic waiting room will never give them. Here is what nobody told you. Cellulite is not a fat disorder. It is a collagen disorder. And the reason no fat-burning program, no matter how disciplined, no matter how aggressive, fully resolves it, is that you have been targeting the wrong tissue entirely. Let me show you what is actually happening under your skin. Right beneath the surface of your skin sits a layer of subcutaneous fat. That fat is not floating freely. In a healthy body, it is organized, held in place by a three-dimensional web of collagen fibers, bands of structural protein that run between the skin and the deeper tissue layers like a tightly woven fishnet. Those collagen bands divide the fat into neat, contained compartments. The surface of the skin above them is smooth because nothing is pushing through in a disorganized way. Everything is held in its anatomical position. Now picture what happens when that fishnet begins to dissolve. The collagen bands weaken, thin, and in some places disappear entirely. The fat cells they were containing no longer have walls. They expand. They push upward against the skin from below. And because the skin itself is thin, sometimes almost translucent in the areas most affected, those fat compartments press visible bumps and hollows into the surface. That is what you see in the mirror, not excess fat, not poor circulation alone, a structural collapse of the connective tissue architecture that was designed to keep everything organized. This distinction is not semantic. It changes everything about what needs to happen to fix it. Here's the next question. Why does that collagen dissolve in the first place? And this is where the real answer lives, the one that your $90 firming cream will never address because it cannot. The primary driver of collagen breakdown in the subcutaneous layer is excess estrogen, not estrogen at normal physiological levels. Excess estrogen, or more precisely, an overactivity of the enzyme that produces it locally, right there in the fat tissue and the skin cells. That enzyme is called aromatase. What aromatase does is convert testosterone, which everyone has in some amount, into estrogen. In the fat cells and skin cells of the thighs, buttocks, and hips, aromatase activity is particularly high. That is not accidental. Those regions carry a biological designation as energy reserves, primarily shaped by evolutionary pressure around pregnancy and periods of food scarcity. The hormonal architecture of that tissue is fundamentally different from the fat on your arms or your abdomen. When aromatase is overactive, two things happen simultaneously. First, local estrogen levels rise high enough to directly break down collagen fibers and elastin, the protein that gives tissue its ability to spring back. Second, excess aromatase damages the fibroblasts, the specialized cells whose entire job is to manufacture new collagen. You are not just losing the structure faster than normal, you are also impairing the repair system that would rebuild it. The collagen fishnet dissolves. The fibroblasts that should be restoring it are compromised. and the fat below has nothing holding it in organized compartments anymore. This is why cellulite worsens during pregnancy. This is why it worsens with hormone replacement therapy and with oral contraceptives. This is why menopause, which most people assume should improve things because estrogen drops overall, paradoxically makes it worse for many women. During menopause, ovarian estrogen production declines, but local tissue production through aromatase does not stop. In some cases, it increases because the body is compensating, attempting to maintain estrogen availability by upregulating the enzyme in peripheral tissues. The result is lower circulating estrogen, but higher local estrogen activity in the exact areas where cellulite forms. That is a level of physiological nuance that a 12-minute appointment will never reach. There is no billing code for explaining aromatase kinetics to a patient. There is, however, a billing code for the laser treatment she will be referred to instead. Now look at your thighs again. Actually look, not at the mirror from a distance. Find a good light, preferably natural daylight, and look at the texture up close. What you are seeing is the surface expression of a process that has been running quietly underneath for months or years. The fat cells are enlarged. The collagen architecture is partially or fully gone in the dimpled areas. The muscle underneath, the gluteal complex, the quadriceps, the hip abductors, has almost certainly atrophied to some degree because movement patterns that load those muscles have declined. And that atrophy matters because when the muscle layer shrinks, it provides less structural support to everything above it. The whole architecture compresses downward. There are other hormones in this picture, and they compound the problem. Cortisol, the stress hormone, directly causes muscle atrophy, not metaphorically. Cortisol is catabolic, meaning it breaks down tissue. Chronically elevated cortisol from poor sleep, from unresolved psychological stress, from eating patterns that dysregulate blood sugar, accelerates the loss of the muscle layer beneath the fat. That lost muscle is not replaced by collagen. It is replaced by nothing. The structural foundation becomes even thinner. Insulin is the second compounding factor. When insulin is chronically elevated, which happens with frequent carbohydrate intake, with insulin resistance, with prediabetes, the body's ability to mobilize and burn fat is essentially locked. The fat cells in those compartments cannot empty. They remain full. They press outward against already compromised collagen bands. Elevated insulin also blocks growth hormone, and growth hormone is one of the primary signals your body uses to repair and rebuild connective tissue. Low growth hormone means slower collagen synthesis. The repair cycle that should be continuously restoring that structural web runs at a fraction of its normal speed. And then there is melatonin, which almost no one talks about in this context. Melatonin is produced during sleep. It is one of the most powerful antioxidants your body manufactures. In the skin and connective tissue, it protects mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside cells, from oxidative damage. When melatonin is low, because sleep is poor, because light exposure at night is suppressing pineal gland output, the free radical damage to connective tissue accelerates. Collagen fibers degrade faster. Fibroblast function declines. The net effect layers directly on top of everything the excess aromatase is already doing. This is what the system does not tell you because the system does not profit from you understanding the full picture. It profits from you buying the next treatment, the next supplement, the next device, each one aimed at a single variable in a multivariable problem. Now here is what actually needs to happen, and I want to be specific because generic advice does not change anything. The first priority is activating the right muscles, specifically the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, the quadriceps, and the hip abductors. These are the muscles that sit directly beneath the areas where cellulite is most pronounced. When those muscles are loaded, challenged, and forced to grow, two things happen that directly address the problem. Growth hormone is released, not in the trivial amounts generated by light activity, but in the significant surges that accompany genuine muscular load. That growth hormone enters the bloodstream, reaches the connective tissue, and stimulates fibroblast activity. Collagen synthesis accelerates. The structural web begins to rebuild. At the same time, the atrophied muscle layer itself thickens, giving the overlying fat and skin a firmer, more structured base to sit on. The exercises that accomplish this are not complicated, but the form and the stimulus intensity matter. Squats, properly loaded, going through a full range of motion with the hips dropping below parallel. Lunges, particularly the reverse lunge variation, which places more load on the gluteal complex than the standard forward lunge. And then something most people have never tried in a clinical context: retro walking, walking backward. It sounds unusual. The research is not unusual at all. Backward ambulation recruits the posterior chain, the entire back of the lower body, in a way that forward walking does not. The quadriceps work eccentrically. The glutes activate in patterns that forward movement never reaches. You can do it on a treadmill, at a low speed to start, or simply in an outdoor space. Begin at 1 mile per hour and increase gradually over weeks. The results in terms of posterior chain activation are clinically significant. For those who are already in reasonable condition, sprint intervals are in a different category entirely. Short, full-effort running intervals, 10 seconds of maximal effort, 2 or 3 repetitions with full recovery between, stimulate the most powerful growth hormone release available without pharmacological intervention. The problem is that full sprinting is demanding on joints that may not have been prepared for that load. You do not start there. You build to it over months. But the end point is worth understanding because it represents the most efficient fat mobilization and growth hormone signal available. Do not work through muscle soreness. This is a mistake I see constantly. People do a hard session, feel the soreness the next day, and train again because they believe consistency means every day without exception. That is not consistency. That is interference. The adaptation from resistance training occurs during recovery, not during the session itself. The session is a signal. Recovery is when the body responds to that signal. Train over soreness, and you are disrupting an adaptation that was already underway. 1 to 2 rest days per week is not a concession to weakness. It is physiology. The second front is circulation, and it is more directly relevant to cellulite than most people realize. In affected areas, the microvascular network, the capillaries that thread through the subcutaneous tissue, becomes impaired. Blood flow decreases. The metabolic waste produced by fat cells is not cleared efficiently. The connective tissue becomes hypoxic, low in oxygen. Fibroblasts cannot function well in a low oxygen environment, so you have a situation where the repair machinery is present but starving for the conditions it needs to operate. Rebounding, rhythmic jumping on a small trampoline is one of the most effective interventions for this specific problem. The mechanism is not mysterious. The lymphatic system, which runs alongside the vascular system and handles the clearance of metabolic waste from tissue, has no pump of its own. It moves by muscular contraction, by breathing, and by the rhythmic compression and decompression that bouncing creates. 10 to 15 minutes of gentle rebounding generates lymphatic flow that passive activity will never produce. The congestion in the tissue begins to clear. Oxygen delivery improves. Fibroblast activity becomes possible in areas where it was previously suppressed. Red light therapy, using devices in the near-infrared spectrum, is another intervention with genuine published data behind it, not marketing claims. The mechanism operates through mitochondria. Photons in the 630 to 850 nanometer range are absorbed by cytochrome C oxidase, an enzyme in the mitochondrial membrane. This absorption increases the efficiency of cellular energy production. In the context of the skin and subcutaneous tissue, this translates to improved fibroblast function, faster collagen synthesis, and better cellular repair. It also stimulates local melatonin production in the skin cells independent of the pineal gland, which means it is working on the oxidative damage problem at the same time it is working on the cellular energy problem. Dry brushing belongs here as well, not as a luxury spa ritual, but as a specific intervention for superficial lymphatic drainage. A natural bristle brush moved in long strokes toward the heart, covering the thighs and buttocks before showering, creates a mild mechanical stress on the skin surface that triggers a vascular and lymphatic response in the tissue below. Done consistently, 4 to 5 times per week, it produces a measurable improvement in superficial circulation. It costs essentially nothing and takes 3 minutes. The third front is the most important and the most ignored. Reducing excess aromatase activity in the tissue, because until you address the enzyme that is driving the local estrogen excess, you are trying to rebuild a structure while something is continuously dismantling it from within. The most effective topical approach for this is a compound called DIM, which stands for diindolyl methane. It is a concentrated derivative of cruciferous vegetables, the same family of compounds found in broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. DIM acts as a natural aromatase inhibitor, meaning it reduces the conversion of testosterone to estrogen in peripheral tissues. There are topical cream formulations available without prescription. Applied to the affected areas nightly, they work directly at the site where the problem originates. This is not a supplement you swallow and hope reaches the right tissue at the right concentration. The topical application bypasses the digestive system and delivers the compound to the subcutaneous layer where aromatase activity is occurring. I want to be precise about this. This is not an endorsement of any specific brand. Formulations change. Read labels carefully. Look for standardized DIM content, and purchase from a manufacturer with third-party testing. The mechanism is real. The delivery format, topical rather than oral, is what makes it clinically relevant for this application. The fourth front is metabolic, and this is where fasting enters the picture, not as a starvation approach, not as chronic caloric restriction, but as a specific trigger for a cellular process called autophagy. During fasting, when insulin drops to baseline and remains there for an extended period, typically beginning around the 16 to 18-hour mark, the body activates a cleanup program that operates at the cellular level. Autophagy literally means self-eating. The cell identifies damaged organelles, misfolded proteins, degraded collagen fragments, and breaks them down for recycling. The raw materials are then used to build new, structurally sound proteins. What this means in practical terms, fasting does not just reduce fat, it removes damaged tissue components and replaces them with functional ones. The collagen that was degraded by excess estrogen, by oxidative stress, by poor circulation, begins to be cleared. New collagen synthesis, driven by the growth hormone that fasting also stimulates, begins to fill in behind it. The process is slow. It is measured in months, not weeks, but it is the only mechanism available outside of pharmaceutical intervention that directly addresses structural tissue repair at the cellular level. Intermittent fasting, with an eating window of 6 to 8 hours, performed consistently 5 to 6 days per week, is sufficient to activate this process. Periodic extended fasting, a full 24 hours once or twice per month, drives it more intensively. Now let me address the mistakes, because they are just as important as the correct actions. The first mistake is evaluating results on a weekly timeline. The collagen architecture in the subcutaneous tissue was not damaged overnight. The fibroblasts were not impaired in a single month. Rebuilding that structure requires the same timescale that destroying it required, meaning months of consistent intervention before visible change accumulates. People make every correct change, then look in the mirror after 3 weeks, see nothing dramatic, and conclude the approach does not work. That conclusion is premature. Take photographs in the same lighting, from the same angle, once per month. The change between month 1 and month 4 is often significant. The change between Tuesday and Wednesday is invisible. The second mistake is training too hard too soon. Muscle atrophy in the gluteal complex and thighs is often profound after years of sedentary patterns. Beginning with the most demanding version of any exercise, heavy squats to failure, sprint intervals, is a guaranteed path to injury and to severe delayed onset muscle soreness that keeps you from training for a week. That week of inactivity sets back the growth hormone stimulus and the lymphatic activity simultaneously. Start with bodyweight squats. Add resistance only when the movement pattern is stable and the soreness from previous sessions is fully resolved. The third mistake is not fixing sleep. Sleep is the single largest driver of growth hormone release. Approximately 70% of the daily growth hormone output in an adult occurs during deep, slow-wave sleep, in the first few hours after falling asleep. If sleep is fragmented, if the room is not dark, if alcohol was consumed within 3 hours of sleep, if the sleep window is less than 7 hours, that growth hormone release is blunted. And blunted growth hormone means blunted connective tissue repair. You cannot supplement your way around this. You cannot train your way around it. 7 to 8 hours of good quality, dark environment sleep is not optional in this protocol. It is foundational. The fourth mistake is continuing to eat patterns that keep insulin elevated throughout the day. This is not about eliminating carbohydrates permanently. It is about recognizing that the fat mobilization and growth hormone activity you are trying to generate through exercise and fasting is directly opposed by chronically elevated insulin. If you eat frequently, including frequent snacking between meals, insulin never returns to baseline. The fat cells in the affected areas remain locked. The growth hormone response is suppressed. The repair cycle cannot proceed. Consolidating eating into a defined window, removing between-meal snacks, and reducing the glycemic load of the eating window itself are the metabolic changes that allow everything else to work. Here is the hard truth about timeline that I will not soften. If the collagen degradation has been occurring for 5 years, you are looking at 6 months of consistent, multi-front intervention before the visible texture of the skin changes substantially. If it has been 10 years, the timeline extends accordingly. The system you are trying to rebuild took a long time to break. It will take a proportional investment to restore it. The people who see meaningful change are not the people who found the perfect cream. They are the people who understood the mechanism, built a consistent protocol around that mechanism, and gave it enough time to produce a measurable result. What I want you to take away from this and actually do, starting today, find natural daylight and look at the affected areas closely, not from a distance, up close. What you see is the surface expression of a collagen and hormonal problem, not a fat problem. Choosing your next intervention based on that understanding changes everything about where you direct your effort. Start with the muscle activation, 3 sessions per week, bodyweight squats and lunges, progressing to loaded versions over 4 to 6 weeks. Add the rebounding, 10 minutes, 4 to 5 days per week. Look into topical DIM cream from a reputable source and apply it nightly to the affected areas. Consolidate your eating window to 6 to 8 hours and protect your sleep as if it is a clinical intervention, because it is. If this gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening beneath the surface, subscribe to Dr. Michael Carter and leave a like on this video. I want to reach 100,000 subscribers, and every person who subscribes makes it more likely that the next woman sitting in a clinic being handed a useless referral finds this instead of walking out the same door she walked in. How old are you? Write it in the comments. I want to see who this channel is reaching, because your age changes which part of this hormonal picture is most dominant in your specific situation, and it will shape what I cover next. The system is not going to give you this conversation. There is no revenue in explaining aromatase inhibition to a patient. There is no billing code for collagen physiology. That is what this channel exists for. Subscribe, hit like, tell someone who needs to hear this.